You're going to showboat, knock down the shot.
For what his value is, it doesn't equate to winning basketball.
When you're talking about the greatest of greats, that's what you have to do. You have to nitpick.
We'll see you in the playoffs. We'll see you in the playoffs.
Welcome, everybody, back into this edition of the TM Up podcast. I'm Jace Eustace, joined as always by my co-host, my partner here, Jarrett Huff. Jarrett, how you doing, man? We've had about a month break or something like that during this offseason. We've kind of taken some time off. Let's get back into it.
Yeah, about 3 weeks, but I think we've both needed it. I mean, you've had some busy times in your life. Congratulations on the new house, by the way.
No, absolutely. Yeah, we're still getting moved in. Everything is working out behind me, but we got everything set up enough to get moved in. So obviously some exciting things going on in your life as well as you start to move, some career opportunities and everything like that. So congratulations to you as well on your side, man.
Thank you. Yeah, I've been once I got out of school, I was working a job that is not in my related field of sports journalism. So it's nice to finally be headed back in that direction after building some savings. So I'll be moving out of DeKalb finally. Been waiting for about as long as I've been here. So it's gonna be nice. I'm excited for what comes in the future.
Absolutely, man. I'll be looking forward to it. Definitely. I'm sure a lot of people will be as well. But let's just get into it, man. It's been a weird NBA offseason, just to kind of put it lightly. Normally in the offseason, we kind of see a lot of big free agents signing. You know, sometimes the KD's going to the Warriors, KD's going over here, Kyrie's doing whatever. We haven't really had those big movements as far as free agency signings. We have had some trades that are definitely going to make some impacts, but I kind of want to open this up and just give our opinions because we haven't had a chance to talk about it yet. The Nets and what is going on in Brooklyn right now. They are apparently prepared to lose KD and Kyrie if need be. And apparently the latest on the Nets looks like Kyrie's trying to work his way to the Lakers and Kevin Durant wants out of Brooklyn, but the market seems to not be as big as people have expected. So, Jared, what do you expect is going to happen with these two guys? And are they just going to run it back come the start of the season?
I think at the very least, both players will be there at the start of the season because let's be honest, the market for both players is screwed up for multiple reasons. In Kyrie's case, he's a flight risk. You don't know when he's going to play, when he's not going to play. I mean, the man has expressed his disdain for just playing basketball for a team, even though that's what he's professionally paid to do. That's what he's contractually obligated to do. But for some reason, there's a disconnect with him and just what's expected of him as a player for an organization.
Yeah.
So a lot of teams, they don't really want to get into the Kyrie Irving market unless it's for, I assume, a pretty discounted price for a player of his talent level. We've heard all the rumors of him going to the Lakers and whatnot, but let's be honest, how are the Lakers going to facilitate a trade? Because if they try to swap Westbrook for Kyrie, I think it pushes the Nets into a luxury tax bracket where they'd have to pay a lot of money just to have Westbrook on the roster, a player who they wouldn't even want. And then when it comes to Kevin Durant, the Rudy Gobert trade just put the trade market out of whack. Because, I mean,
absolutely,
Utah got a haul because, Danny Ainge, that's what he does when he makes trades. So now you have a player like Rudy Gobert, and then the gap that's between him and Kevin Durant, you're going to have a beyond a king's ransom for Durant. And teams are like, Durant's 35. Who knows if he's going to be happy here? Because Durant's kind of been moving around lately. So yeah, it's just the trade market's out of whack. Honestly, I think the Nets are going to start the season with both of them because they're, in my eyes, they're unmovable right now.
Yeah, it's really gotten weird with the Nets, and I have a little bit of different take. To be honest, I think the Kyrie to the Lakers trade seems more than likely it's going to happen and it's not going to happen just because I don't see another team wanting to get into the Kyrie business. And the Lakers are the only ones that have seemed to have an interest in, hey, we can get into the Kyrie business. And obviously the Lakers are desperate to get rid of Russ. Obviously, there's still some things got to be worked out. Obviously, the Lakers are holding on to that 2027 first-round draft pick that apparently they are just so, they really want for some reason. They're unwilling to deal in anything. But I think when push comes to shove, I think we'll see that trade go down. And I think depending on the details of the trade, it does make the Lakers better. And they have a chance, I'll say a chance, a small chance, but a chance to be really good if it does happen. But it's by far from a sure thing if that happens for them to be a contender. Kyrie has worked in his career. He's only worked, I should say, in his career alongside LeBron. And I think they would both, at this point in their careers, be open to kind of running it back and giving it a second shot. As for KD, I'm not surprised that there's not a huge market because I believe there is such a thing as a talent that's too costly to trade for. And KD might be within that bubble. Obviously, he's one of the best players in the NBA. He's fantastic. He's a Hall of Famer. He's a champion. He's a former MVP. He's all these things. But the problem to me is pretty simple. A lot of teams cannot send some of their top players to the Nets because of that rule with the whole Ben Simmons contract. Can't have two max rookie extension guys. So when you're talking like Miami Heat, they can't have Bam Adebayo and Ben Simmons on the same roster. Obviously, he talked about the Suns as well. That's not a possibility now with, bringing back DeAndre Ayton and then the whole Devin Booker situation. So to me, that kind of crosses out a lot of teams. Then you go to the next tier of teams. A lot of teams don't have an entire young core of 3 or 4 players alongside 3 or 4 draft picks that they can give up for a 34-year-old KD. And lastly, the teams that do have the assets to give up would not be good enough giving up those assets, even with KD, that KD would be happy going there. And that's kind of the situation where KD's kind of finding himself in. It's like, yeah, man, I want to go to Miami. But would I want to go to Miami if they have to give away Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson, Gabe Vincent, 3 or 4 draft picks, Kyle Lowry, you start throwing all these guys in, then all of a sudden is Miami a destination that you want to be in? Like, yeah, you'll be another top heavy roster and you'll definitely be a contender and a chance to win a championship. But Miami's big thing is they got that depth. That's what makes them so great. So at this point, I would not be surprised at all if nothing comes from this offseason with the Nets and they decide to run it back with Ben Simmons, with KD, and with Kyrie, because I'm going to be honest, I don't know if any of them are going to be able to find a better place to compete for a championship other than Brooklyn at this point.
See, that hypothetical trade package on Miami that you gave, that would, if I'm the Miami Heat, I would do that in a heartbeat. But here's the thing. Brooklyn's asking price is so ridiculously and unrealistically high. They wouldn't accept that. If I'm Miami, I do that in a heartbeat. But what Brooklyn wants in return for KD is another superstar, which when you're trading superstars in situations like this, you can't expect to remain a contender by moving Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving.
Absolutely.
If you're Brooklyn, take the assets, take the future assets, take nice role players, whatever else that maybe you can flip for more future assets. Because at the end of the day, if you move KD and Kyrie, don't expect to contend. It's super unrealistic. Also, the East is so good and so deep, you might as well take a few steps back, retool, build right again, because that it's just unrealistic to like you said, with you trade KD somewhere for the package Brooklyn wants, it's just going to sap everything, that all the momentum that the other team that's trading for Kevin Durant has. I mean, we saw Brooklyn this year in the playoffs. Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving weren't enough.
Absolutely.
If you're trading for Kevin Durant, you want to keep your stars. Because let's say if the Bulls stepped up to the plate, made the trade, because they're apparently quietly in this KD trade market still. I don't know what the Bulls are going to do. They'd have to trade future picks realistically. But if we trade DeMar DeRozan or Zach LaVine, or I'd be fine if Vucevic went, if that was the best player in the package. But if you trade DeRozan or LaVine, okay, yeah, we're a better team. But I don't really think it makes us a contender, because you're taking away key components that makes the team as good as the Bulls are, and the Bulls are like a middle of the pack team in the East right now.
No, absolutely. And Miami's going to look at that as saying, hey, if we're going to get into this, we want to pair Bam, Jimmy Butler, and KD. Those are the 3 that we want. We want to form that big 3. And Brooklyn, they're saying if they're going to make it happen, they want Jimmy Butler. Miami doesn't want to give up Jimmy Butler, because the whole reason for getting into this trade situation is I want to pair Jimmy Butler and KD and Bam. That's what I want, because that is a championship caliber team. That's what that if you're making that move, you're trying to make that jump step. And I just think Brooklyn is too unrealistic. And speaking of why it's unrealistic, I'm just going to transition right into our next topic too, because I feel like it's the reason that the trades are so unrealistic right now. And that is the Rudy Gobert trade. So Everybody knows by now, Rudy Gobert got traded from Utah Jazz to the Timberwolves. The Timberwolves sent Malik Beasley, Patrick Beverly, Leandro Bolmaro, Walker Kessler, their new draft pick, a 2023, a 2025, a 2027, and a 2029 first round pick, and a 2026 pick swap. So that is 4 players, 4 first round picks, including a pick swap to get Rudy Gobert, the defensive player of the year. But obviously, I think he has his limitations. But what did you think when you saw this trade come through and you're like, what, Utah got all of that for Rudy Gobert?
Well, it's to be determined what's going to happen in the playoffs and how that's going to factor in. But I think it's, in a way, even though they gave up a lot, it's going to be nice to move Cat out of the 5 into a 4, which I think he's more suited for as a stretch 4. Because let's face it, Cat can't be the rim protector. He can't be the defensive anchor. We've seen that. I even though, well, say what you want about Patrick Beverly, I think he gave that team a really nice edge that team's needed for years. Because let's face it, Cat's never really had a backbone, and I feel like that kind of trickled on down. That's kind of why Jimmy Butler had his whole blow up and took the third stringers or second stringers, whatever it was, and defeated the starters in a practice. It makes Minnesota better. I think they'll be a better team this year, but it doesn't make them a contender. And that's why I think they gave up too much, because Rudy Gobert, I mean, we saw with the Utah Jazz, it doesn't make them a contender. They weren't a contender. They were a second round exit in the playoffs every single season.
And then that's the thing. After being the first round,
apart.
Yeah, and after being the number 1 seed for many years too, like they would go in as the number 1 seed. I think 2 of the last 3 years before this last one, and you're right, second round exit. But man, this is oh, go ahead.
Oh, and another thing, Rudy Gobert is approaching 30.
Yeah.
So centers around the time they get 30, it's either they maintain or they fall apart. And more often than not, especially in this era, they fall apart. I mean, we've seen guys like Dwight Howard fall apart around 30 after a year or so on the Rockets. He wasn't Dwight Howard anymore. And that contract, it gets uglier and uglier every season goes by. I kind of wanted the Bulls to get into the Rudy Gobert sweepstakes, because at least we had the pieces to where we're a better team than Minnesota and what we would have given up, which I hope we wouldn't have given up the haul that Minnesota did. But at the very least, there was a chance Rudy Gobert kind of puts us into that contender bracket. But at the same time, I was kind of okay that it didn't happen, because I just look at that. He's over like $44 million at the last year of his deal.
Yeah.
I don't want the Bulls paying that out, because I believe that's 4 years of Rudy Gobert. And so I'm kind of glad that the Bulls dodged that bullet. And hey, it's Minnesota's problem right now.
Yeah.
They'll be a better team.
Yeah.
But it doesn't get them over the hump.
Oh, I hate to be this guy, but I got to be honest. The Timberwolves, they absolutely got hosed in the trade. And for me, it's not because I value Patrick Beverly or the future talent of a bunch of 6th graders right now. It's because they went all in to try and push their team over the edge, but they picked the wrong guy to do it with. Like, I am all for cashing in draft picks and cashing in some young talented players to try to get a star, but I think you picked the wrong one. I don't think, you're trying to strike while you think your championship window is open, but I don't think Rudy Gobert is the answer to that roster specifically. I do like moving Cat to the 4, because I think he is a more natural 4. I think you're 100% on that. But I think now with this team with Cat and Gobert, it just reminds me kind of the AD Boogie team that they put together down in New Orleans with the Pelicans. And wow, that was a pretty good team. It was an exciting team. Really, in this era, we haven't seen 2 kind of dominant big men play alongside of each other with, really lackluster kind of guard play. You don't really have a star at the guard position, and in this case, it's a little bit different. Obviously, I think Anthony Edwards is great. You still got D'Lo, who, he's a good, solid point guard in the NBA. But I think the Wolves got better, but at what cost? Like, for what ceiling did you get to? We've seen teams give up all their depth for a star that isn't their direct need before, and we know how it usually ends. It's a second round exit, and it just goes along with what Rudy Gobert is. I think they got better, and I think they're going to definitely get better on the defensive end. I think they have, obviously you got the Stifle Tower, you got Cat playing the 4, who Cat is not a great defensive player, but just the size is going to cause some problems for a lot of power forwards in this league. I don't know. Like I think they're a better team today, but I just don't know. You touched on it, but by the end of that Rudy Gobert contract, how great of a team are they? And are they locked into it? It isn't one of those untradeable contracts that they can't get out of. And now they're not having those draft picks to have young guys that can come in and take minutes. And it's just, it's a cycle. And I'm all for cashing in and try to win a championship because it's hard to win a championship. And I think so many teams are kind of fearful of trying to trade in the future when they think, hey, we might have a chance to do it, but you got to pick the right guy. And I don't think Rudy Gobert was the right guy to push all of your chips into the middle of the table for is just when I'm looking at this roster. Oh, Rudy Gobert. And not to mention that the trade, when you just look at it, it seems like no one wants to make a deal with Danny Ainge because you're always going to come out looking like you got swindled is what it's just going to look like every single time. But another big trade that went down, DeJounte Murray from the San Antonio Spurs got sent to the Atlanta Hawks. And this one was a smaller trade as far as the haul. It was still a pretty good one, though. They got him for Danilo Gallinari, which they've waived. And I believe he's signing with the Celtics, if I'm not mistaken.
Sign with the Bulls, man.
Yeah. And 3 first-round picks. 3 first-round picks and a pick swap. So what did you think of this new backcourt we have pairing down there in Atlanta with DeJounte Murray and Trae Young?
It's an interesting pairing. DeJounte Murray definitely will hide some of Trae Young's deficiencies on defense for sure. That's without a doubt. But this trade only works if Trae Young allows it to work. I'm always skeptical when 2 point guards are paired together. I'm always very skeptic of it because one of the guys is going to essentially have to take a backseat in ball handling. And we kind of saw it with LeBron and Kyrie, although that did work out because Kyrie played off ball pretty well with LeBron. And obviously they won a championship doing it. The thing with Trae Young, though, is Trae Young can carry that Hawks team, and at other times he can do too much that kind of takes him out of games. I think it makes the Hawks a better team, but I mean, it just kind of puts them into that like play-in range. It kind of keeps them around there. So I'm not expecting too much more from this Hawks team. I don't think it moves the needle enough in the East because the East is just getting better and better.
No, I agree with that. And I think to kind of play off what you said, where some nights Trae Young looks like he's the best player in the league and he can definitely carry his team to a victory on any given night. He can just drop 50. And some nights it looks like he's forcing things. That to me is where DeJounte Murray can definitely help out. I think DeJounte Murray has had to come up through that Spurs organization. And obviously they're so centered around the team. They're not an individual, he's gotten his props, which he deserves because he is a great young player and he's getting better every single year under Greg Popovich. But now I think as long as Nate McMillan has a backbone as a coach, which I think he does. I think he's a good head coach. I think this was a down year this last year, but I don't think it was a fluke. They got to the conference finals. I think he's a good head coach. I think from the coaching perspective,
from McMillan's a great coach.
From the coaching perspective, I don't think it's a fluke
that they got that far.
Maybe not, but I think Nate McMillan has the backbone to coach this team so that on the nights where it's not falling for Trae Young, DeJounte takes over as the playmaker, the de facto playmaker, and Trae Young almost plays the kind of Klay Thompson role that just you're a catch and shoot guy. Like we can set you up and kind of just I really wish they would look at a lot of film from the Golden State Warriors now and kind of look, obviously DeJounte Murray, if you're comparing Trae Young to Steph Curry, DeJounte Murray is not the same shooter that Klay Thompson is. But there's a lot of things on the floor that he does that Klay Thompson does well with as well. Is kind of just catch and shoot ability, doesn't dribble too much. I think DeJounte Murray can do that at times, but I think he can also take over as the de facto playmaker when it's not falling for Trae Young as well. So I really like this trade for the Hawks. I think creating that young Murray backcourt is really intriguing. I agree. I wrote down as well. It obviously helps the defensive ability of the team. And I think he can provide shot creation and also playmaking in that 1B role is where I kind of play him. I think they got a 1A and a 1B down there now. So this is big for the Hawks. They made the conference finals 2 years ago. They had a down year last year. I think this is a big step in the right direction. And I'm also excited just to see Murray out of San Antonio now that, the Spurs have fully embraced that kind of rebuild mode they're going into. I still have to kind of sit down and go through the rosters once they all get finalized. But I think to me, this gets them back into a probable playoff spot with the continued growth of others on that roster too. I like that they were able to get this trade done. Obviously, they kept John Collins down there as well. They have a few other good pieces. I believe they still have Clint Capella, if I'm not mistaken, too, down low. So
Yeah.
I liked the kind of roster they have. I'll still have to look down and go through it all, but I mean, I think this was a step in the right direction for the Hawks. I think this was a move that they needed to make.
Now, one thing I will say about this is this Hawks roster could still be going through some changes and look very different after the trade deadline. I mean, we've heard for like the last 2 seasons that John Collins wants out because him and Trae Young really don't work together. Mm-hmm. So I expect Collins to be somewhere else playing in a different jersey by February. And even though I don't understand this, like there have been rumors about trading Clint Capella, which I really like him and Trae Young together. Yeah, because Clint Capella punishes teams on the boards and on offense down low when the team doesn't have a center or size that can match up. I mean, I've watched the Bulls play the Hawks, and even though we get the best of the Hawks, we struggle against Clint Capella. I mean, we don't have answers for the guy.
He's a difference maker, no doubt.
For the Hawks' sake, I hope they hold on to him. I don't know why they'd move him.
Yeah, I agree. This is definitely making things a little more interesting in the East. It's just another one of those teams to put in that mix where when we're starting to put together who's going to be our playoff teams next year, there's a lot of things to consider, a lot of things to think about. So I'm sure we'll get to that a little bit later as we get closer to the next season. But one more trade I want to talk about is the Malcolm Brogdan trade. And Malcolm Brogdan, man, as much as it pains me to say this, the Celtics got better and they completely fleeced the Pacers on this Brogdan trade. They picked up Malcolm for Aaron Nesmith, Daniel Tice, which I'm going to go on the record. Daniel Tice, probably by the end of next season, will be back on the Celtics because he'll get waived somewhere and it'll be right back on the Celtics. Just seems what it happens. And Nick Stauskas, Malik Fitz, Juwan Morgan, and 2023 and a 2023 first round pick. I know what you're thinking. That's a lot of who's, and yeah, it is a lot of who are those people. So what do you think when you saw this trade go through, the Celtics picking up Malcolm Brogdan?
I think this is one of the best teams or one of the best trades for a team in years. Because that's the thing. No rotational pieces were given up for a high quality point guard. The perfect point guard that would have been probably would have turned the tide of this series. Because let's be honest, Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum could not hold on to the ball. Every time Jaylen Brown would dribble more than 3 times, I'm just expecting like, all right, where's the turnover? To the point where me and my roommates watching the game, and I've probably mentioned this before, we were counting the turnovers for halftime because we were just waiting for that 16th turnover, which at that point it was basically no chance the Celtics would win. I mean, Jason Tatum set a playoff record for most turnovers in a playoffs. So I think he definitely cleans up some of the issues they have. And Marcus Smart, while he took strides as a point guard this year, I still don't think he can be a point guard on a championship team. So this can shift their whole lineup. If you still want to keep Smart in the starting lineup for defensive purposes, you start him, Brogdan, Brown at small forward, Tatum at the power forward, and then your choice of Horford or Williams, whatever works for the team on any given night, depending on who you want to play. That makes the Celtics, I think it puts them up there with the Bucks to where we're kind of like, all right, would the Bucks have been in the finals this year if Chris Middleton was there? And which I think they were, but now I think it puts the Celtics into a category like, I don't think it's Milwaukee's conference anymore. I think there's a crapshoot for who's going to be in the finals, Milwaukee or the Celtics. But yeah, the only player that really touched the floor in that trade, like you saw Tice early on in the series against the Warriors, and then you'd see Nesmith, who could develop into a really nice player. Defensively, he looked good, but on offense, it was a little rough. So great trade by the Celtics. I could have sworn Danny Ainge came back to the front office for a sec to make that move happen. But yes, great trade. I mean, I don't love the trade for the Celtics game better, but great trade for the Celtics.
No, absolutely. This one made me mad because Brogdan, he's the perfect fit to the roster. As much as Celtics fans will say that they already had a great point guard in Marcus Smart, they needed a true one with playmaking ability to help offensively with Tatum and Brown, but also he's not a liability on the defensive end either. Enter Malcolm Brogdan. He fits that roster perfectly. And I like it too. I think they still probably do start Smart, I think, Al Horford moves to that 6-man role. I think they start on most nights Robert Williams and just roll with those 5. And obviously Al Horford will still be getting good minutes as long as he continues to produce with everything that he's doing. But I think at this point in his career, he's more than happy probably coming off the bench with a chance to win a title. So I don't think that's going to mean too much to him. But on the other side of things, I don't know what the Pacers are doing at all. I said this when they traded for Halliburton. I was like, yeah, you got a really good player, but for what? What are you going to do with him? You're just going to hang on to him. And, they traded for Halliburton, but sadly with how this team is run, he's just going to sit idle in Indiana. It's like, what are you doing there? I don't see the way out. I think Indiana is really struggling as far as how they run things. The Eastern Conference champs got better because of the absolute sham of management with the Sacramento Kings. The Indiana Pacers. That was my bad. But they are just absolutely terrible as far as their management goes. They gave up Malcolm Brogdan for basically nothing. And they made a conference supposed to be rival a lot better. And they're going to be better for a long time. And it sucks that it's the Boston Celtics, but they just continue to get better.
I'm okay with the moves that the Pacers have been making, just because, obviously that core of TJ Warren, who went to the Nets, should have went to the Bulls.
Yeah,
I'm probably going to say that about a lot of players. Just that whole group with Sabonis, and I think they were maxed, especially after Victor Oladipo went down a couple years back, and then is obviously no longer with the team because he's with your Miami Heat.
Absolutely.
That team reached a ceiling, and with the style of ball Rick Carlisle likes to play, Sabonis just didn't make sense anymore in it. So I think starting a rebuilding process around Halliburton, Jalen Smith is another good pickup that they got from the Suns midseason. I think the Pacers could build into something one day, but obviously they're years away from whatever the final product is going to look like. So I didn't mind the moves, and they got a first round pick out of it from the Celtics. So
yeah, we got to move on for something else that hasn't quite happened yet, but it might happen any day, or it might even happen in between when we record this podcast and when everybody sees it out there. But after Utah traded Rudy, kind of the next topic for the Jazz turned right to Donovan Mitchell and what's to come of him now. Is he going to be sticking around with the Jazz, or is he going to be calling a new place home? So he's been linked for a long time to the New York Knicks because of kind of his team ties and his home. But increasingly, we're starting to hear the Heat get mentioned more and more kind of in that sweepstakes. I don't even know if I'll call it a sweepstakes actually at this point, but just kind of in conversations for Donovan Mitchell. So just what do you think? Is this a trade that goes down? Do you think Donovan stays around for the rebuild now that's going on in Utah, or is he a New York Knick?
Donovan Mitchell will not be on the Jazz in the 2023 calendar year. And this is classic Danny Ainge management style. I'm sure you remember back in 2014, a season after Danny Ainge swung for the fences and made that big trade with the Nets that the Nets are still kicking themselves for, when he basically traded the entire 2008 championship core plus Jason Terry for a bunch of picks that turned into some really nice players for the Celtics. Because then the next season he moved out Rondo, and the Celtics were fully in a rebuilding phase, which turned around pretty quick by picking up Isaiah Thomas. And then from there to Kyrie. And then here we are a couple of 6-7 years later. And the Celtics are one of the best teams in the East, all thanks to Danny Ainge. Danny Ainge doesn't like being a middle of the pack team. He doesn't like being the GM of that. It's either we're going to rebuild, we're going to get some assets, which he is one of the best. Him and Stan Presti, they're like 1 and 2, mano y mano, and just gathering assets. So Donovan Mitchell, it makes no sense because the Western Conference is still a really good conference. It's getting better with a lot of the additions this past offseason, and guys like Kawhi Leonard just coming back from injury.
Yeah.
Donovan Mitchell, I don't think he's a player that's going to elevate this team to do anything. It's just going to waste time for everyone that's involved in that organization. So, and he said he wants 7 first-round picks for Donovan Mitchell, apparently, which,
oh God,
I mean, he got a haul for Rudy Gobert. I don't know if a team's going to give up almost a decade and a half worth of picks, in terms of just how it works with the stipend rule. But yeah, no, Mitchell's not going to be on the Jazz for really long. It just doesn't make sense for the team, and it's just that's Danny Ainge's MO.
Yeah. Look, I really do think he could help the Miami Heat get back to the finals. I believe that his go get a bucket ability is exactly what Miami was missing in the playoffs. I think he'd be a perfect fit for that kind of Heat culture. I know he's not a great defensive player. In fact, he's probably a below average defensive player, but I think everything else that would be going on around him in Miami would help make up for that. And Miami needs a bucket getter. They need someone that can go out there, they can shoot, and they can score alongside Jimmy Butler and Tyler Hero when he's not on the court. So I I don't know, man. Am so do I think that he is exactly what Miami's missing? Yes, I do. Am I scared to engage in trade talks after seeing how bad the Gobert trade was for Minnesota? Absolutely, I am, because I do not want to see Miami just lose out on everything to take a shot with Donovan Mitchell, because we don't know if that's it. Like, for all we know, we add Donovan Mitchell and we win the championship next year. And that's great. That's fantastic. But for all we know, we add Donovan Mitchell and we're right back in the same exact position. And then if you trade away 7 draft picks, you trade away guys, Hero, Robinson, Lowry, Vincent, Strus, whoever they demand on that side of the trade, 3 or 4 or 5 first round picks, then you don't kind of have those guys that are coming down the pipeline that might be able to help you in later round or in later years if Donovan Mitchell isn't enough to push you over. So, like I said before in this podcast, I'm all for taking that shot when you think your championship window is open. You got to make sure you pick the right guy. And I'm just worried that because Danny Ainge is the one who controls the rights to Donovan Mitchell, I just don't know if he's going to be the right guy, just because he's going to want a king's ransom for it. Because if we know one thing about Danny Ainge, he does not like to be seen that he's going to lose a trade. He's going to win every trade, at least in his mind, or at least on paper when they go through. So that's what worries me about the Heat's potential of adding Donovan Mitchell. And
Yep. I would.
no, go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, if I'm the Miami Heat, I look at the Utah Jazz as a much more welcoming trade partner than the Brooklyn Nets, because the Brooklyn Nets are gonna want to poach one of your stars. The
Yeah.
Jazz will just take your future assets. They'll be like, so if you're trying to contend, going with the Jazz is your best bet.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. I definitely see what you're saying. And it's kind of, you got to pick one to deal with, but I don't know, man. But let's move on to our final segment here on the Team Up podcast. And that is, of course, Tee 'em Up. So it's been a little while, Jared, but I'm sure you had one saved up. Who are you giving your technical foul out to?
I'm teeing up Anthony Davis, his agents, his social team, just anything on the subject of Anthony Davis. I've seen, we all saw that video from like April where it was like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
I haven't shot a basketball in like 3 months, which, oh, that's what you want to hear from your center who had a very down year and was injury riddled and everything like that. Like, no, I want my basketball players who are trying to get us back to championship contention to be putting in that work constantly and consistently. And there's just been a lot of questions in the past about Anthony Davis' dedication to the game, and it's front and center. And now all of a sudden, the past couple of weeks, I've been seeing on social media, like, we've been hearing like Rob Pelinka saying Anthony Davis having like the best offseason of his career.
Yep.
And then there's a photo posted on a beach with Anthony Davis and the trainer. I assume they're running in the sand to train. And I'm just seeing all this and I'm like, this is just damage control for that video and for everyone calling into question Anthony Davis's grind and stuff like that. So I'm done hearing it. Tee up Anthony Davis. Well, I see what's going on. I'm not a fool. You can try to make the thing with you, LeBron and Westbrook, work because you all bought in together, supposedly. There was another report that came out.
Yep.
I'm done hearing about the Lakers. It's going to be another bad year. I'll see you guys at the bottom of the Western Conference, and you can put that down, write it down, sign my name on that.
We'll see about that one. I don't know if I'm ready to go that far quite yet, but man, I am teeing up Grant Williams, and I'm teeing up Grant Williams because if you haven't heard the Celtics forward, he stated that even still, he does not believe that the Warriors were the better team in the NBA Finals as they beat his Celtics. He came out, I believe it was on a podcast. He said it, obviously, he was joked around with at the ESPYs by Steph Curry, who was saying, wearing a green suit, saying, I know this is your color. Maybe I'll let you wear a ring later. Maybe not. But come on, man. Like the Warriors were the better team. That's the reason why they beat you. They were more of a team. And I know the Celtics were built on this, one man, one for all. We all play together, and that's great. You guys exceeded expectations, especially the way you turned your season around. Credit to you guys. barely beat Miami. And you know what? You got through them, even though you tried to choke it away there at the end and came just one shot away from doing that just so. So, you know what? I'm all for confidence, but you got to have some humility. You know, they beat you guys. It wasn't all that close. You can still have pride for your team while being realistic about the need to improve to reach that championship level. Because as much as it was impressive for you guys last season, you guys haven't won a championship. You're not champions. The Warriors, they won. They can say whatever they want. That's kind of how it works in the NBA. You win, you could say what you want. So it's okay to admit it, but you just got to, when you're making these statements talking about how our team was still better, I refuse to believe that the Warriors are better. You just sound salty. You don't sound proud. So for me, I'm teeing up Grant Williams because, you know, he was kind of annoyed me in the playoffs anyways, just one of those players. But this just was not a good look for me when I look at this for Grant Williams. So
that man wants to be Draymond Green so bad.
So bad.
I mean, he's like that. He's at Walmart level Draymond Green.
Yeah.
It's just
be on the lookout. That we're going to be seeing the Grant Williams show popping up on all your podcast platforms. So just be on the lookout for that.
And it's a new season. We're going into a new NBA season. If you thought for a second that Jace wasn't going to find a way to dunk on the Celtics, well, you're mistaken, because I'm sure it's going to continue on and season 2 of the Team Up podcast. I love it, Jace.
I got a lot of
same
things.
Energy, Jace.
Oh, no doubt, man. We're going to be keeping that energy all season, but that's all we have for this week on the TMO podcast. I want to thank you guys all for joining us, and be sure to follow along on all of our social media platforms for some fun NBA content throughout the week. Thank you guys all for listening. We'll be sure to catch you guys next time.
And remember, Anthony Davis, I see through your bullshit, man.